First and foremost, welcome to the show, and thank you for joining me.
Yeah, dude. Thanks for having me.
The first question I asked was actually based off a newsletter you'd sent today with an interview that you had done, and I actually want to apply some of these tips, but I just want to start off. What's on your mind?
Yeah, dude. What's not on my mind recently has been family's been sick, so that's been top of mind. Kind of sleep. You know, if you've got little kids, you know that you're basically always sleep deprived. But especially when everybody in the house is sick. So, you know, with I'm lucky my wife usually takes care of me when I'm sick, but also she's more sick than I am today. So I happen to be the one running around doing everything, taking care of the kids, running the business, doing sales calls. And then my son got an ear infection in school, so I had to run and pick him up. And it's been a couple of days, bro. It's been a couple of days, but I'm looking forward to turning in a little bit earlier tonight than I did last night. I was up to like midnight working, and I might sit down with a beer here in an hour or two and kick it for the rest of the evening. Shut my phone off. So,
you live in Las Vegas, right?
Vegas, yes, sir.
Oh, Vegas, cool. Hey, on that, your podcast has grown so much over the year. Your content, you were crushing it, and as a fan, like, I'm proud of you and I'm excited for you. I'm cheering for you. And I realize in your most recent episode with Chris Van Vliet, I can remember him when he would have 900 views on a YouTube episode and he'd be interviewing The Rock. And people now see whether it's you or him exploding like, oh, they're an overnight success. Like, no, it's a decade process. But anyway, I referenced your newsletter earlier. You've interviewed so many titans of industry, whether finance or people, athletes, celebrities, and you're so great at interviewing. How can you ask for stories and not just answers? What is your tips and advice for that?
Yeah, it's a good question, man. And frankly, when I started podcasting, I didn't even think that this was something that you had to do. You know, like, it was the last thing on my mind. First thing on my mind was like, oh, I got to get a microphone. I got to get equipment. And I got to get a camera. And I got to do this other stuff. And what software do I use? How do I edit? All the stuff that come to find out is like inconsequential and not super important. And the one thing that I wasn't super worried about was like the thing that I should have been the most worried about, which was, how do you interview somebody? And as soon as I did my first like 3 or 4 interviews, I was like, I am really bad at this. And if I'm going to keep doing this, I should probably make some sort of an effort to not be bad at it anymore. So I did. I started kind of studying and learning as much as I could, although there's just not a lot of material out there about how to do this the right way. So one thing that I developed in terms of your specific question, how do you get more stories from people instead of instead of just getting some information or a short form answer, what I tell people is always remember your buddy Ted. And TED stands for tell me about, explain to me how, or describe for me. So most of the time when we're forming questions, our initial thought is to use interrogative words, because that's kind of definition of a question: who, what, where, when, why, how. And we typically, when you ask those questions, it allows for not as contextual answer. It's gonna prompt a shorter answer, typically, usually more informational type of an answer. And sometimes that's what you want, but other times you want a story that's going to engage people. And, you know, facts tell, stories sell. Stories are the things that engage. Stories are the things that inspire, that move people to take action, that get people to knock over belief dominoes in their mind, which is really the thing that gets people to finally take action, to believe it's possible for them. And story is really what helps do all of those things. And if you look at the best communicators in history, they all have that in common. They're great at telling stories. So when you're interviewing, especially if you're interviewing somebody who's not used to being interviewed a lot, then your goal is to try to get more stories from people. And then you can kind of punch in on certain things. Like you build this kind of zoomed out story view, and then you can punch in on certain things and ask more kind of directed questions that are designed just to get a piece of information instead of elicit a story. But sorry, I am still sick, so I might cough.
No, it's okay.
I'm giving your editor work.
It's me. I'm the editor. So
I'm giving you more work. You're welcome.
Yeah, that's okay. Worth it.
So I try to do the tell me about, explain to me, describe for me. So that way and a lot of times too, I'll say, set the scene for us. Show you want to kind of use these words that start immediately creating imagery in the guest's mind. So instead of saying where'd you grow up, it's like, set the scene for how you grew up. It's like, well, if you tell me to set the scene, I'm thinking the place that I grew up. I'm thinking the culture or the environment that I was in. I'm thinking socioeconomic background. I'm thinking about what my parents did for a living.
The Bible school, right?
Bible school stuff. Yeah. I'm thinking a lot more all encompassing than just kind of answering one direct question. So yeah, remember your buddy Ted. Tell me about, explain to me, describe for me.
On that, as I mentioned, your content is just, man, you're cranking it out. It's all phenomenal. YouTube, podcast, all these different videos, the newsletter. What is your biggest project and challenge at this current moment?
Biggest project and challenge at the current moment is trying to figure out how to use my time most efficiently. So for a while, I was just a creator. I was a podcaster, and mostly what I did was reach out to guests and interview guests and do that over and over and over again. And then I started building the business side of the business, which was focused on making money and revenue and employees. And I got really head down in that, and I got really far away from being a creator, and my podcast stopped meaning a lot to me. The listenership was going down. I wasn't focused on stuff that was interesting to me anymore. I was saying yes to interviews I wouldn't have said yes to before. And it was creating out of a place of desperation instead of a place of inspiration. And, but I was focused on building the business, and we started this agency in 2022, and we did 7 figures our first year, and it was great, except for that I abandoned my podcasting thing, which is the thing that really matters a lot to me. So now the big project for me is we brought in a president for the company. We're onboarding him this week, to just somebody that's going to take a lot of the day-to-day off of my plate so that I can get back into that inspired creator mode, because I think that's kind of where my unique skill set lines up in terms of like, what's the activity that I can do that I can't hire somebody else to do. And there's a few of them that are those activities. And so hopefully we're making the right decision. I guess, ask me again in 6 months and we'll see where we're at.
So outside of your growing success with your content, but basically outside of your content, what are you celebrating right now?
Outside of my content
and your business, right? Because to me, it's from an outsider's perspective, it's like you're taking a level up. It's evolving. You're putting up podcasts. I don't know how many times a week, but it seems like 2 to 3. You have the YouTube clips, you have the newsletters, the newsletter. But yeah, outside of your evolving success in terms of like your business and all that, and the podcast, outside of that, what are you celebrating right now?
Frankly, kind of the same answers before. I'm celebrating bringing on somebody to take a lot of my work off my plate. I'm good at, like I said, I'm good at a few things, and I'm not good at some other things. So I'm really hoping that this guy can jump in and be good at the things that I'm not good at, so that we can build a thriving business without, beating my head against the wall or going insane.
I think that happens to all of us, but
yeah.
You mentioned just beating your head on the wall. Is there a current mental model or mindset that helps you prioritize while balancing family with personal aspirations? Because you talked about you're married and you're a father, young kids, but just is there a current mental model or mindset that helps you prioritize while balancing family with personal aspirations?
Yeah, I'm constantly trying to figure that out. I think balance is a myth. I don't think that you can achieve balance. I think work-life balance is a myth. If you shoot for that, you'll never attain either one. And this is kind of a trap I fell into recently that I'm, again, trying to figure my way out of, which is if you shoot for work-life balance, typically what's going to happen is when you're not working, you're going to feel guilty for not working when you're with your family. And when you're working, you're going to feel guilty that you're not with your family. And neither one of those are good, because you should be focused on the task at hand, and you should be doing the thing that you're doing to its fullest extent. So I think that you have to schedule things in your calendar, like time with kids, time with family, or, I don't sacrifice my dinner time. I don't sacrifice my date night with my wife every week. There's certain things that I just don't compromise on. But to think that it's going to be balanced while you're in the middle of building something that's bigger than you is just ludicrous. It might work for somebody that has, a job and they get off at 4 p.m. and they have vacation days and sick days and holidays and all these other things, and they still get paid no matter what happens, and they do their job well. That you might be having a different conversation right now. But if you're like me and you're trying to hustle and you're trying to get ahead and you're trying to build something that's bigger than yourself, work-life balance is, it's a pipe dream in my opinion. I don't think it's possible. It's just kind of to me, it's like it's going on the ebbs and flows and trying to read how you should be right now, and being willing to accept what those results are in that moment. Like, it's more like riding waves than it is constantly trying to find this balance that's impossible to uphold. It's like when you're on one in business, stay on one and stay focused and hold the line, because it's not always going to be like that. And then it's like, okay, I've been on this wave for a little while. It's time to go into shore and spend some time with my family. But when I'm with my family, I'm there and I'm with my family, and I'm not thinking about the 38 things that I didn't do in my business yet. So, and then when I'm in my business, I'm in my business and I'm thinking about my business, and I'm not worried about, did my son pack his lunch properly or whatever? You know what I'm saying? Like you like, focus is the problem. It's not a balance problem. It's a focus problem. If you can focus on strategic directed, work in your business and stuff like that, you shouldn't have to work 16-hour weeks to build something cool, especially if you hire the right team, have enough capital, or have partners or something like that. Like, you should be able to build something really great. It's just that you're not focused on the right activities. So that's when you have these people that are running around, their business isn't growing, it's actually dying, and they're working 12-hour days. They never see their family. Everything's unbalanced, and they're not reaping any reward. It's just probably due to a lack of focus, and a belief that balance is possible. And in my opinion, I just don't think that it is.
That's great. And you're balancing all that. Also, your journey from 210 to 190. And I'm going to say you look like you're 209 right now. Like, you're looking a little bit lighter than your most recent episode. So,
I'm actually, that episode was recorded a little while ago. I'm actually a little bit under 200 right now.
Okay. Because in the episode you said, hey, my goal is to get to 190 by the end of March. Yeah. And I'm like, damn, man, like, that's, we're a week away or 9 days. And, but I wrestled in high school. So I was like, oh, you could lose 10 pounds in a couple of days,
Yeah, I could. It wouldn't be like actual weight loss.
No, yeah.
Yeah, but I was like 196 a couple days ago when I weighed last.
No, that's good.
But I was 223 in January, so it's been 26 pounds or something like that.
That's great.
In the last couple of months.
Hey, when you're out hustling, right? You're working, like you're burning. Your metabolism's going. So good for you.
Well, but to your point, it is also difficult. It's another thing to throw in there. It's like you can, a lot of people. Again, the balance thing. A lot of people will just completely ignore their health and focus purely on their business. And they look back in 2 years and they built a cool business, but they're 65 pounds overweight, and they can't even walk up the stairs without sweating and breathing heavy, or you can't put your socks on without bending over, and your stomach gets in the way, so, that's not a good scenario either. And that's why I say it's like ebbs and flows. Cause like, I know I can't focus on my health the way I focused on my health for the last 3 months. I know that I can't do that for the remainder of the year and give my business and my family the attention that they both need. This past 3 months has been more focused on my health than it's been on my business or my family. I've prioritized gym time. I prioritize eating properly. I disciplined myself when it came to my diet, but it also means that I didn't have as much energy. I couldn't work as often. And when I worked, the hours weren't as good. There are some things that I sacrificed to reprioritize my health and get it back in order so that I can, be healthy, have good energy, and focus back in on building the business so that I can have money and freedom to spend time with my family. It's just going to be a constant ebb and flow. And I think that the sooner you accept it, the better, because I think the balance thing is just, it's fake. It's not real.
No, I love that. You talked about, I've never thought about it like that. It's not a balance problem. It's a focus problem. With that, what does the first 60 minutes of your day look like?
Typically the gym time. I'm typically out of bed and then going to the gym. If I'm out of bed before the rest of my family, then I go to the gym by myself. If I'm out of bed, if my kids wake me up, then it's usually me and the wife getting the kids ready for school and taking them to school. And then we go to the gym together. But usually the first thing I do is either take my kids to school or go to the gym.
Okay.
And then I usually sit down with my journal and prioritize my meetings, like look at my meetings for the day, make sure I'm ready for those, and then write out some things I'm grateful for, and then write out my priorities for the day. So I subscribe as much as I can to the kind of the one thing method, Gary Keller, Jay Pappison wrote a book called The One Thing. And I'm a big believer in that. Like, what's the one thing that I can accomplish today that by doing that one thing, it makes all other things easier to do. So I try to write out, hey, what's the one main thing that if I accomplish 0 other things today, it still is a productive day if I get this one thing done? And then what are the 2 kind of sub things? So it's really like, what's my 3 main things? And then I have like a list of other things that I can do if I have time to get to them. But at least at that point, you're tracking, and those 3 things should be things that go along with your longer term goals. Right. So like you should have, you got your 3-year vision, you got your 1-year goals, and then you have quarterly breakdown. Like, what do we need to accomplish each quarter to get to that annual goal? What do we need to accomplish this year to get to that 3-year goal? And then that breaks down into the day. What do I need to accomplish today in order to be on track to accomplish this thing for the quarter, in order to be on track to accomplish this thing for the year, in order to be on track to accomplish this thing for 3 years? So if you can break it down that much, then you really should only have like these core problems that you're trying to focus on. And if you have 3 or 4 hours of dedicated focused work, you can probably knock it out. The majority of like your actual rock moving, needle moving productivity for the day, instead of being in there for 16 hours because you're checking Instagram every 20 minutes. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Hey, you used the word grateful, and I'm going to ask you a question that I absolutely stole from Chris Van Vliet. His podcast is fantastic, and I know you already know this question's coming, but what 3 things are you grateful for?
Health. Primarily, even though we're all sick, but I'm lucky that me and my family have maintained good health for the most part. And then I'm thankful that I have a business that allows me to decide when I want to spend time with my family and when I don't. Freedom's a huge value of mine. And you would have told me a few years ago when I was knocking doors in the heat of the day to make money that I'd be making a salary from my own company that I built, that I can work anywhere in the world and still accomplish. I think I'd be pretty happy about it.
Yeah.
So I'd say freedom. And then the last thing would be all the other things we take for granted. That's one of the ones I try to look for. I'm trying to come up with one and trying to give you ones that like aren't the obvious ones, like my family, my kids, my wife. Like those are all obviously very important.
Then I'm going to ask you a unique question at the end. I'm going to ask you a different question at the end of this interview. And I think, to my knowledge, I've listened to a lot of your content. I don't think you've been asked this question before.
But yeah, the last thing I would say is like, I try to often contemplate the things that I take for granted and really position myself to be really grateful. Just the ability to walk, the ability to speak clearly, to think, to see, to hear, to taste, to smell, things that a lot of us take for granted every day that not everybody in the world has.
Yeah.
And try to really kind of meditate on some of those things. I like my buddy Bradley talks about this a lot. He talks about how he's like, if how bad do you want $10 million? Like, how grateful would you be tomorrow if you woke up and there's $10 million in your bank account, more than there is right now?
Right. Very grateful.
It'd be a pretty great day. Right. Well, what if I said, okay, I'll do that for you, Martin. I'll give you $10 million, but in exchange, you don't wake up. Do you take the $10 million?
Changes the answer, right? Like, it's not as an easy answer, right? You have to think about it more.
If you're dead,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. Like all of a sudden you don't want the $10 million. Like you would rather wake up tomorrow than have $10 million in your bank account and not wake up tomorrow. Right. So why don't we wake up every day with that attitude that I can't believe I woke up. This is better than $10 million. Another day to live life. How awesome is that? You know, we don't wake up like that. We think about all the problems that we have. We're thinking about how anxious we are. We're thinking about this thing, this stress, this problem, that problem, instead of waking up and realizing that we have the greatest gift, which is another day. You know, so I try as much as I can to put myself in that mindset because it often sets the tone for the way that you view everything the rest of the day, your relationships, the opportunities that come and go, the problems that you have. Everything's viewed in this light of like being grateful rather than this light of being anxious or spiteful.
That's really deep, and it's 100% right. Earlier or last week, I did a podcast episode that I'll be releasing this weekend, but it's with a guy who he's earned the Purple Heart, which is one of the most distinct military honors. And because he lost his foot in an explosion in the Middle East, but since that time, and this is in 2011, and he was 28 at the time. I think, you know, and you're roughly that age now. I know you're 30, but at 28, I mean, you're in great, you know, just you're so young. Since that time, though, he's gone on to do like he does the like Paralympic Games and always almost like he got a new lease on life, and he's accomplished so much.
Yeah,
with one foot. Yeah, it just reminded me of that story.
Yeah,
I want to switch to some different topics. You have interviewed, and this is a question I did prepare. You have interviewed a growing list of entrepreneurs, athletes, celebrities, authors, titans of ministry. Has there been one specific piece of advice or a lesson that hit you like a lightning bolt?
There's been a lot because there's been a lot of different like topics and niches and different things that we've covered on the show. But I'll steal Shaq's answer because I thought his was pretty all encompassing and really generic. Because I asked him the question basically, hey, if you could make a video and you knew that video would go viral enough that everybody in the world would see it, what would the message be on the video? And he said something along the lines of have respect for other people. And that really is like that is really a big value of mine in terms of how you treat other people, is that I didn't see a lot of that growing up in the, you know, really kind of polarized culture I grew up in.
Yeah.
Where there was just kind of this acceptance and respect for your fellow human being, regardless of background or, you know, religion or whatever else. And so I think that probably is potentially why it's that way for me. But you kind of, what happens is like in society, especially with the way the media is, you have these really polar opposite sides, the left and the right, that are completely polar opposite. And then society tries to put you in one of those buckets as if it's like two buckets, but really it's like a line. And 90% of people fall somewhere in between the polar right and the left. But because we're taught to think in categories and identity and buckets, you know, you hear somebody votes for this person, or they go to this type of church, or they don't go to church, or you hear like something about somebody and your immediate reaction is to judge and to cast hate or to spread lies or gossip or make jokes or, you know, do something like that instead of just have respect for your fellow human being.
Yeah.
Try to have a little bit of empathy for where somebody else might be coming from. Hey, maybe they were raised differently. Hey, maybe they grew up in a different spot. Maybe those things happened to them. You know, I'm not here to speak for other people. I'm here to speak for myself and to respect other people. So I really liked that was the piece of advice that he gave, because I thought that it would, like, if there were one message for the world to adopt, I think that would be one of the chief ones, because we're not ever going to agree on everything. But if we can respect each other, that's kind of the secret to continuing to work together and find synergy, look for commonalities, find the things that we can connect on rather than look for the things that we don't want to connect on and hate each other for it. So I like that message a lot. And it would probably be one that be very similar to the message that I would like to get out to more people.
Think about, was it Nicole Mitchell? I listened to an episode where that's the pastor turned stripper, right?
Yeah.
You know, I just think about them, probably the people she knew for the longest time and had great relationships were how their opinions of her transformed, not even overnight, just in a matter of seconds, simply because of her newfound chosen occupation or belief.
Yeah, not even just their opinions about her, but like their willingness to spend any sort of time with her at all. Just like their complete shunning and just complete ostracizing her for the choices that she made. You know, it's just to me so clear that like you love me because of the agenda that you have. You don't love me because of me.
You're dropping a lot of quotable things, so this is going to be great for me as I do editing later. Can you talk about a time when did you have that, like, your aha moment and realize you had a calling? Because again, I know we were talking a little bit before I started recording that you're onto something, and I really feel like this is something that you're destined to do. But yeah, anyway, did you have like a calling or an aha moment?
Not really, man. I just wanted to do it. And then I would put in the reps to do it and went through the pain of doing it. You know, like I think I just had a higher pain tolerance because I knew I wanted it.
Yeah.
So even during the times where it sucked and where a lot of people give up, I just didn't, because I knew that I wanted it. And, you know, and I think there's a lot of value there. There's a lot of merit there because, you know, I don't think that I'm uniquely talented to do this compared to other people. I think that I was just willing to put in a lot of reps to try to make it happen because I wanted the results so bad.
Well, speaking of that, do you recall like your first real big, what you consider a real big win or maybe a turning point? And I'm going to say, aside from your John Lee Dumas, because I know you talked about going to Puerto Rico and you were selling shirts at his event and, you know, following him through Masterminds. But I've heard that in a couple in the show before. But yeah, aside from that, do you have any turning points?
I think when I got Grant Cardone on the show, that was kind of a big one for me, because he was somebody that I'd listened to for a while, and he was a bigger name. He's a lot bigger now than he was then, but he was still a pretty big name in the space at the time. And I think it was my first ever in-person interview, which was a different dynamic than I was used to, but it was in person at his studio in Miami. And that was a big vote of confidence for me because it just it took somebody that I previously thought was unattainable and conditioned me to think that he was attainable. So it kind of went into the rest of my kind of dream guest list and was like, all right, well, if I got him, who else can I get? You know what I mean? Like who else am I currently looking at that I think is impossible, that might just be a DM or cold email or introduction away from me?
I have my list. That's cool that you had that, because I always have there's a book that I carry with like my list of dream guests. That's pretty cool to hear you say that. Yeah,
that was a big one for me, man. It was, like I said, along the way, you're just looking for more notches in the confidence belt.
Yeah,
the more that you can build that up and have evidence to point at. You know, it's not a matter of like how many affirmations you say in the mirror. It's a matter of having so much evidence that you're good at this thing that you have an unshakable confidence that it's something that you're pretty good at. And that's how like guest reach out and interviewing became for me.
I'm excited about when I carve this up into YouTube shorts, and there's just a lot of things like that.
Good.
Yeah.
Makes your job easier.
You've already answered this, but I'm going to ask this in a different way because it may actually provide a different answer, but not in terms of the actual stock market. What do you consider your best and most fulfilling investment?
I mean, the thing I've invested the most in is me, for sure. I think people look at investing wrong most of the time because they're never willing to invest in themselves.
Yeah.
So they have an unrealistic expectation of what other investments are going to bring to them. It's like, well, how do you know that this is a good deal? If you've never looked at another real estate deal, you never looked at another angel investment, you never looked at another, name it. How do you know it's a good deal? Well, this other person told me. Well, how much do you trust them? Better trust them a lot, because you're talking about putting, your first $25,000 into an investment that you know nothing about.
Or 400,000 in your case, right? Just do what you had mentioned before with masterminds and
Yeah. So for me, yeah, it's a matter of like, that's why I think my best investment's always been in myself, because it's the one investment that will always pay dividends. You know what I mean? Like, if I make myself a better version of myself, then that version of me is more capable than the previous version of me, which means that it's like, you know, it's kind of the whole, like, if you're investing into something, you're buying the fish. And if you're investing into yourself, you're learning how to fish. Kind of that like, to expand on that old, you know, adage about teach a man to fish, he'll eat.
yeah,
You know, give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day, teach a man to fish, he'll eat for life. That's kind of how I look at it. Is like, if you invest in yourself, you're learning skills, and those skills can return at a much, much higher, like disproportionate ROI than even the best real estate investment will do. So it's like, yeah, could I put that 400 grand into real estate? And would it currently, right now, be working out better for me? The answer is yes.
yeah.
It would be. It would be performing better. My net worth would currently be higher than it is right now if I had put that 400 grand in real estate, and I'd be getting like a monthly return from it and all that stuff. But I believe, and you can fact check me in a decade, I believe that in a decade from now, like my 30s will be my earning years, where I'm set up to make it happen that way because I've invested $400,000 in myself in the last 4 or 5 years in like my late 20s.
Yeah.
So if this version of me is capable of like, if my 29-year-old self could go build $1 million company in 8 months, then what can my 39-year-old self do? Does that make sense? It's like the return is so outsized. It doesn't like, it's not linear. It's not put 400 grand in, get 500 grand back like it would be with real estate. Even if it's a great real estate deal, it's like put 400 grand in, 5 years, it appreciates, you get cash flow. It's like I put 400 grand in and I got 800 grand back. You know, it's still pretty linear.
But you're fulfilled as well. And also when you're in your 90s, you're going to look back on this time and just realize, I'm glad I went for it. Right.
Well, yeah. Well, it's a matter of like, it's a matter of like that 400 grand that I've invested could lead to one business partnership that turns into a $40 million company, where it's like that's my point, is like, you want to invest in things that have the potential to bring outsized returns. And you are always the best person to do that with, because you are your biggest outsized return. If you create a connection or you craft a skill set that's so valuable, your ability to earn skyrockets, which gives you the ability to mess up on investments and still be able to go out and make more money. That's why people don't feel confident about investments. The reason people don't like writing checks on investments is because they don't know how long it's going to take them to get another 25 grand built up in their savings account.
Yeah.
Or 100 grand or 50 grand or 500 grand or whatever the amount is. It's like, well, I don't want to put money in that real estate deal, or I want to put money in that other deal, or I don't want to buy that franchise, or I don't want to do that, name the investment, because it took me 12 years to save up this first $150,000. So if I lose this $150,000, I can't afford to wait another 12 years before I get it back. You know, it's like, well, if you were investing in yourself the whole time, then, you know, you realize you let go of $120,000. But if you have the confidence that you're like, oh, well, I can replace that in my bank account in the next 8 months because I have this skill set that I now have that I didn't have 8 years ago, then you're a lot more likely to make, then you're a lot more able to like spread your investments across different things and learn more about how to invest properly and take more losses, but be okay with it, and then have bigger wins eventually. You know, it's just like, to me, the only way it makes sense to not invest a large amount of money in yourself is if you literally don't care about building wealth. To me, it's like, if you want to build wealth and that's the game that you're after, then you should be your number one priority for investments before anything else, especially if you have less than 50 grand in the bank.
You have this, even through a screen, you have this very natural confidence. Where do you get your confidence from?
I mean, being a podcasting stuff, I think it's just a repetition thing. Cause we've released over 800 episodes on my show, but I've also been a guest on, 400 or 500 other shows. So it's just been like almost, 1,500 of these things at this point.
Yeah. This is 30 for me.
but there, hey, 30 is better than most. 30
Yeah.
is better than most. But I think I got a fair amount of like communication, kind of speaking confidence, pretty young. Cause I was like teaching and speaking and doing public speaking from the time that I was 12
Yeah.
all the way through college. So by the time I graduated college, I'd probably spoken in front of people, close to 100 times. I would guess, maybe 50 to 75 or something like that. It's just like I spoke more from age 12 to age 20 than most people will speak in their life.
Wow.
So I think and then doing door-to-door sales will increase your confidence in that regard as well. Because you got to talk to a bunch of different people from a bunch of different walks of life, communicate with them effectively, convince them to buy things. It's kind of a cutting your teeth way of learning how to communicate. So if you can kind of combine all of that stuff, then I think it kind of goes into that. And then, like I said before, it just comes from the fact that I know that I've done the reps, and of the things that I know about, I'm confident that I can add value with the things that I know about because I've put in the work and I have evidence that stacks up that helps me, that I can point back to draw confidence from. So it's just a matter of keeping your confidence bank account more full than it is empty. It's just like any other bank account. It's like if you got more withdrawals than you got deposits in your confidence, then you're in a rough spot. But if you got more deposits than you have withdrawals, then you're probably in a pretty good spot. And so, I don't think there's a lot of ways to deposit in your confidence bank. Probably the number one way is to always keep the promises you make to yourself. I saw a quote recently that was like, the most difficult person to earn respect with is you. For yourself.
Yeah.
Because, most people don't have confidence in situations because they don't even trust themselves. Because they don't have an impeccable word even to themselves. They say they are going to, get up at this time. They say they're going to read this book. They say they're going to work out. They say they're going to change this thing. And they never follow through on any of the stuff that they say that they're going to do. So that subconsciously creates this distrust and a poor relationship with you. So if you're trying to go into a job interview, you're trying to sell something to somebody, you're trying to portray confidence in some sort of situation, you don't even have confidence that you don't even trust yourself. How can you portray confidence to somebody else? So confidence comes from like this inner peace with you that you are who you say you are. And if other people don't see that, then it doesn't bother you because you know who you are. Does that make sense? Like, if you
it does.
With this idea that like, I'm not bothered by everybody else's thoughts of me because like, I know me, because I know what I do behind closed doors, because I know that I show up, because I know that I do what I say I'm going to do. So you can carry that confidence in when you know that you're doing the stuff that most people aren't doing when they're by themselves. And then you combine that with putting in reps, and it, makes for a strong confidence bank account.
You talked about the confidence bank account, getting the reps, having examples of your success and just, examples of your experience. And again, the confidence. But with that, expectations will always continue to rise. What's your advice on handling expectations? What's your advice on handling pressure when the expectations continue to rise?
That's a good question, man. I kind of struggle with that myself.
Yeah.
And frankly, most of the time it's the expectations that I put on me rather than the expectations that other people put on me. So I'm finding ways to deal with the pressure. Now, for a while, it was kind of overwhelming. Probably a year and a half ago, if you asked me that question, I would have been like, I don't know. But now it's just a matter of asking myself the question, whenever I get into a situation where I feel overwhelmed, I ask myself the question, what do I want? I try to recenter myself and regain clarity. Because if you find yourself overwhelmed and you don't truly want the thing that you're attacking, then the prudent answer at that point might be to pivot or change or do something different. That's not always the answer, though.
Yeah.
You can kind of sometimes maybe convince yourself that that's the answer because you want to give up so bad. But it's not always the answer. But sometimes it is the answer. So for me, it was like when I got to that point, it was asking myself the question, what do I want? And at the end of the day, I was like, this is still what I want. I still want to build a big company, because I started feeling pressure when it was mainly just me and one or two other people on my team, and we were building we were doing 7 figures in revenue in the first 8 months of the year when we started the business. And it was like, oh my gosh, the work is piling up. I don't know how to run, a multi 7-figure organization.
Yeah.
What do I do here? And, you either retreat and give up and go back to your thermostat setting at what you were before and just be like, you know what, I'm cool with a multi 6-figure business and a podcast. And if that were the answer for me, that would have been an acceptable answer. I'm very much conscious of self-awareness and understand that, like, I'm not one of those people that says that everybody should have to go become a billionaire or whatever, or even want to become a billionaire. It's like, if you like your lifestyle business and you can make 120 grand a year working for yourself, making $500,000, you got an assistant or two, and that works out for you, then do your thing. But when I asked myself that question, I had clarity around the fact that, like, no, I want to build something that's at least an 8-figure business. So the option of leave or quit or give up or pivot or change was not there. The only other option was acknowledgement that pressure will always exist in this environment, and if this is not for me, that I should get out now. But if it is for me, then I have to find ways to deal with that pressure and unplug and talk to other people about how they deal with that pressure. Go get around other top, high performers, and figure out how to deal with it. Give myself an out. Go play some golf. Spend time with my kids. Watch a movie. Prioritize things that maybe were vices before, like TV or something like that, but it makes me unplug. Or have a beer with my friends instead of, like, avoiding alcohol at all costs. It's like, what are the things that I can do to relax and kind of make myself go, you know what? It's okay. Everything's going to be okay. You multiply it out over over long enough time, everything's going to work out. Just doesn't feel like it right now. But if you're in it to win it, you only have another option. It's that or go get a job. And that wasn't an option for me.
Yeah. Just wrapping up, I have 2 last very quick questions. Something unrelated to anything business. Is there a historical figure that you identify with?
Identify with? Not really, in terms of, like, somebody who I'd be like, I'm like that. But people I look up to would be like Marcus Aurelius.
Oh, yeah.
Winston Churchill, Teddy Roosevelt, Leonardo da Vinci. Yeah, there's a few.
Man, very like philosophical type people. And hey, the last question I have, and it's a question I ask on every single podcast, and it's very, very similar to the Shaq question that you talked about when he talked about a video that would go viral. But my question is, if there was a giant billboard on the highway for everyone to see, and it had your picture with your leadership message on it, but we'll say Travis with the short hair, not Travis with the long hair, and Travis at 190 pounds, but or 189, well, right? Because you're an overachiever, but
that's right.
Anyway, with your message for everyone to see, and everyone's stuck in traffic, what would that message say?
Something around empathy. That's why I like my show, because I like to pull story out of people. Like you mentioned, Nicole, who's now, for all intents and purposes, she's a sex worker. She's like an independent, porn creator on OnlyFans. And then after that, I'll bring on a former congressman. And then after that, I'll bring on an author. And then after that, I'll bring on a psychologist. And then after that, I'll bring on an athlete. My goal is that somebody listens to some episode of my show and initially thinks they're not going to like somebody, and then hears something about their background or story and goes like, you know what? I don't agree with how they ended up or what their choices that they made, but I at least understand more about how they got there.
Yeah.
That to me is a win.
Nicole Mitchell's a prime example of that. It was a fantastic, yeah, it was great.
That was the goal. That's the goal, is to just have more empathy for your fellow human beings. I think if the world had more empathy, we'd have so much less polarity, less fighting, less arguing, less hate, less of the isms,
Yeah.
We'd have so much less of all of that if we would just try to have a little bit of empathy for each other, background, where you came from, trying to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. I think all those are very valuable exercises when it comes to building relationships and having respect for your fellow human being.
Hey, if you want people to check out your content or learn more about you, where should they go?
TravisChappell.com. Best place probably is kind of the hub, CHAPPELL, TravisChappell.com, where you can open up your podcast app and search Travis Makes Friends. That is the name of the new show, which is kind of figuring it out, Build Network combined. So yeah, Travis Makes Friends is the name of the new show.
Hey, and I'll put all this in the show notes. Travis, thank you so much. This means the world to me. You were so kind to me, and what I appreciate most is that you always, despite your growing busy schedule, you've replied to many of my Facebook messages, and it's not like an auto bot, like it's actual, like, I don't know, maybe you're sitting on your couch drinking a beer, like playing video games, and you're just not really checking. Anyway, I appreciate just the genuine responses, and again, despite your growth, that you're making time for people, so thank you.
I appreciate you always reaching out, man. Thanks for listening to the show. I always appreciate anybody who listens to the show. I try to make time for anybody who sends me a message about the show. So thanks for having me on, man. It was a lot of fun.